Hey, we're live. So look alive. This is what we look like when the cameras aren't rolling. Man, it's just so cold in this building, and there's too many sermons to write, and
we have too good of air conditioning.
Oh wait, people are watching. Oh, hey,
Come alive! It's alive.
Pastor, I want to take you. Wait a second. We need to start with some announcements. Let's start with some real stuff that's coming up, right?
Okay. I don't know. All I can think about is the sermon I'm writing right now. I can't
Where
honestly
are you
not
preaching
think
tonight?
about it. I'm preaching at the School of the Prophets. They're reviving that. It started back in the 60s.
They're reviving prophecy?
They're reviving the School of the Prophets.
Where is it?
It's in Gadsden, Alabama.
Man, you drive around a whole lot.
I do. I do too much, to tell you the truth.
Well, stop it like they used to. What's that? Who does that old skit? Is that Bob Hope, Don Rickles, Jack? You know what I'm talking about? Where the guy it's like a psychiatry skit, and he picks up the phone and he's like, "Yes, it's James Smith. I'm the on the phone psychiatrist. What's the problem that you have today?" And they list, they're like, well, I have such anxiety, I have such terrible anger issues, my husband's going to leave me, so on and so forth. He's like, well, I'm going to give you my proven method for success. Now, it's 2 words. You need to meditate on these words. You need to think on these words. I'm going to give you these words. Are you ready for them? Stop it.
Yep.
Just stop all of it.
Yeah, just stop it.
It's your fault. Quit doing so much,
Naturally.
Pastor.
Good. Thank you.
Did I hear
that.
you wrong? Are you starting yet another degree, or you're just talking about you're still in the midst of your PhD?
No. I'm still working on this second doctorate.
Okay, I was just double checking.
I'm taking a class. It starts Wednesday.
Well, that's something that I guess we should quickly mention is that today, actually, in the Valleydale building, New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary.
Right here,
right now.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about that?
No, we are the extension for New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary. I think there are 50 or 60 students that are here today. That's exciting. I'm excited about that. Now, that pumps me up.
Yeah. There was you could feel some excitement in the air. I think there's a lot of lay people that want to get involved with that. Mm-hmm. It's here. Like they just come to the building on obviously they got to go through get approved to be students and whatnot. But Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays that's going to be happening here in this. But great use of the facility. I feel like.
Sure, it's smart use. You have all these facilities; they ought to be used continuously.
Definitely. Well, Lord willing, we'll be able to use these things for a lot more education in the future, as well.
I hope.
Yesterday you were speaking.
I feel like Rick and Bubba.
Yeah? Which one do you feel like?
I feel like Rick. I identify with Rick.
Yeah.
So if Rick and Bubba ever watch this, you're our role models.
Well, one of you is. Here's looking at you, Bubba. What was I going to say? So yesterday we were preaching on Judges chapter 11. Yeah. You were preaching. We were listening.
Yeah.
Judges chapter 11. And we really should recap more of the message, but there were a couple things in particular that I really want to draw attention to, and I want to take you a little bit off the map today. You don't seem like you want to stay on the map today.
I don't know.
You look like you have that far off look in your eye.
I've just got this sermon on my brain.
Okay, well, all right. Well,
church at Laodicea.
Just you can continue to think. Well, you can talk about that if you want to, or here what really really struck me. You talked about a man's character. Oh, this is actually perfect because a man's character under pressure. You don't know a man's character if he's on a Norwegian cruise sipping daiquiris.
No, I didn't say that. I said, with an ice cold Coke, sitting out on the
virgin
deck,
daiquiri
by the pool. Well,
he's on the Virgin cruise line.
On
sipping virgin daiquiris.
Norwegian. You don't know a man's character. You don't see a man's character when he's sitting by the pool in Palm Springs sipping an Arnold Palmer. You don't see it. You have to put him in a stressful situation where there's pressure and anxiety and there are problems and he's being squeezed. It's like the Heinz ketchup bottle. You don't know what's in it until you squeeze it. And when you do, what's in it comes out.
Oh, this is just hypothetical. This has never happened to you, right?
All the time. I am constantly being squeezed. But that's when you see a person's character, and that's what it was for Jephthah, for his life.
You talked about another, and you guys, for as far as the way it went for Jephthah, I'm going to challenge you to listen to that message because I want to go even yet another direction. Just another thing I want to zero in on because this is so dear to my heart. You took us to, and I've heard you do this a couple times. It's such a strong analogy. You took us to 1 Samuel chapter 22, where David is hiding away from the forces of Saul, and the men that come to him are dilapidated men. Mm-hmm. They're men that are in debt because Saul is taxing everyone. They're men that are discouraged, and they join up with David, and you show how in 2 Samuel 22, those are the men, the same named men that become his captains. These are the mighty men of valor, the mighty men of David. But what is the difference? What happened in between? What did David teach them first?
Well, if you go to 2 Samuel chapter 23, and you begin to read, it says, "Now these are the last words of David. David the son of Jesse declares, the man who was raised on high declares." He's talking about God has raised me up. God did this. "The anointed of the God of Jacob and the sweet psalmist of Israel. The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me." Now listen to that. There's your inspiration right there.
He knows it.
He's talking about inspiration. The Spirit of the Lord spoke by me. His word was on my tongue. I think what David did, and that's what he's talking about there, is this introduces the mighty men of David, is I think back in that cave with those men when they started coming to him, is that he just began to teach them how to worship.
What do you think that looked like in your mind's eye?
I think they were sitting around in the back of a cave with these hundreds of men in there, and David is in there with, a fire, the flames, in that dark kind of illuminating his face, and I think he just breaks out into one of his psalms. I think he just begins to sing, one of the psalms.
And he showed them what it's
about.
And
he shows them, here's a man, a man's man, David, and he shows them he's not ashamed to worship in front of other men. That's the first thing, is to get men to understand that to worship is not something feminine or something childish, but it is something a man does.
Do you think that was something that they had trouble understanding?
Yes, I do, just like they do today.
So how do we fight against it? How can you fight against that sort of stigma before a man grows up to be a man and he's like distanced from that whole idea?
Well, I think they have to see. As men, we like to be shown things. We like to see things. That's why I think you have so many things on YouTube of how to put together, whatever, put together a table, whatever. We go to that. We see all of those. I think we have to stand up as men and show men how to worship.
Now, it sounds like you even use the analogy like David's in the cave, he's talking to these guys, he sings a song, he teaches them how to sing, not just a particular song, but in general, how to sing and how to render that unto the Lord. And so often when we talk about worship, it comes down to music. What we're talking about is singing.
Well, he was a psalmist.
Yeah.
And that's the way he expressed it. He said, the word of the Lord was on my tongue. I don't think it was just singing. I think he also talked to him as well. Worship is not just music. But David was a psalmist. He did take and form the choir of Israel.
He did.
He broke them into sections. He also took men and made an orchestra out of them. All of these instruments that they played. So I think and one of the most natural ways that we praise God is through song. Do you realize that the animal kingdom doesn't have anything like that? Now, we talk about birds singing, but they really don't sing.
Yeah, that's all they can do.
But we are uniquely that part of God's creation that can sing.
Yeah, that's a
and
gift.
Christianity is the only religion in the world that has music. Now, you got chants with this, and you got chants with that, things like that. But nothing has a Haydn or a Beethoven.
Oh, with that rich tradition, I see what you're saying. Now, the reason that I brought this up, although everything you said has been really helpful, is because the one thing that keeps coming up, whether they talk to the choir, whether they think about the vision of the church in the future, is how does worship and the arts fit in with training us to who we're supposed to be? How does it fit in with making us the men and women we're supposed to be and the evangelists that we're supposed to be? So what got my attention is you're talking about David. He's like, okay, I've got an army that's just showed up, and he didn't first hand him a sword and a spear. He didn't first say, like, here's how we work as a team. No, he said the first thing is you got to turn around and worship the Lord.
Let me give you a good illustration of this. In the 1960s, which you don't remember because you're so young,
I've heard
in
stories.
the 1960s, in the middle of the civil rights movement, when there were those from the North that came down to work with the African Americans in the South,
right,
especially the older African Americans in the South, before those African Americans would go out in the street to do a march, they would always go to the church first,
yes,
to worship. And they could never, ever, those from up north who were not involved in church, who were not, many were not even Christians, but they had a heart and a hunger to help the civil rights movement, could never understand why the African Americans always had to go to church. And yet they understood that before you could ever do warfare, there had to be worship. And so I take that analogy and I apply it to the church today. And we've lost that. You know, we think, well, you got to go to the classroom, you got to go to the lecture, you got to go to this, you got to go to that to learn how to do these things. Listen, the best place to begin is always in worship. The only place to begin is always in worship.
I see that's one argument that I use. Sometimes people think about, well, how is a church service supposed to look if we're trying to make it engaging and open to new people that would come into the church? And if I'm being honest, like, and you know, we see a culture that craves authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. Well, what should they see? Well, I would hope that they would walk in and see like us worshiping the Lord with reckless abandon, us not being afraid of the hard truths, whether that's spoken or whether that's in song. So I think that we should be expressing that, no matter what. I'm not really sure why I went that direction with it. Well, let's close on Jephthah. Thanks for taking me there again. The thing with Jephthah that connects to worship that I think that will be a good ending point is you talked about how when he finally spoke back to the people, he was basically saying words as unto God, not even to the people.
Here's the 11th verse of the 11th chapter. Then Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead. Now remember, he's going back to the very people who's rejected him, who hated him, who turned him out, who said, we don't want you here. And he fled all of that. He left. So now, how difficult is it to go back and face the very people that despised you, that rejected you? It takes some courage to do that. It really does. Jephthah went with the elders of Gilead, and the people made him head and chief over them. And Jephthah spoke all his words before the Lord at Mizpah. So everything that he's saying, all of his words is being spoken before the Lord. So that all of his conversation, everything that he's saying to these men, everything that he's saying to the army there, it's as if it's all... Now think about that. Should not our conversation be that way?
That's what I'm thinking about.
Everything we say, whether it's in private, whether it's in public, that all of our conversation should be as before the Lord, because God hears every single word we say.
Strong application for us today. Should we leave the people with that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So every word before the Lord, you can also cross-reference Colossians. Every work that you do is unto the Lord. That's Colossians chapter 3. We love you guys. Thanks for tuning into this resource from Valleydale. You can check out Pastor Mac's sermon from yesterday. It's entitled A Place Called Good, Judges chapter 11. And we'll see you back on Sunday for more content. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Valleydale Resources podcast for all of our Wednesday night messages as well. Thanks again for tuning in. For tuning in.